Um minutinho só que eu...
Então
Você já
pronto,
tá gravando?
já, estamos no ar.
Ok, estamos no ar. So we have today in our seminar the talk by Professor Mike Devetsikiotis entitled Designing a Smarter Infrastructure, Computing, Communication, and Energy Resource in an Internet of Everything World. And Professor Mike Devetsikiotis is coming under the CAP Sprint program hosted by the State University of Rio de Janeiro, and he's visiting us and delivering this seminar. Michael Devetsikiotis was born in Thessaloniki, in Greece. He received the diploma, a degree in electrical engineering from the Aristoteles University in 1988, and a master and PhD degree in electrical engineering from North Carolina State University. In 1993, he joined the Department of Systems and Computer Engineering at the Carleton University, Ottawa, Canada. As a postdoctoral fellow, he became tenure-track assistant professor and associate professor, and the department associate chair in 1998. Mike returned to the electrical and computer engineer at North Carolina State University as associate professor in October 2000 and became a full professor in 2006. He served as coordinator of the Master of Science in Computer Networking until 2011, when he became ECE Director of Graduate Program, managing one of the largest graduate ECE programs in the country with over 800 students and 4 staff. In July 2016, Mike joined the University of New Mexico as a professor and chair of the ECE department in the School of Engineering. His research work has resulted in 50 refereed journal articles, 135 refereed conference papers, and over 60 invited presentations in the area of design and performance evaluation of telecommunication networks, complex social, technical, and cyber-physical systems, and smart grid communications. His work has received well over 8,000 citations. In 2017, he was inducted to the North Carolina State University ECE Alumni Hall of Fame. Michael joined the IEEE as a student in 1985, became IEEE Fellow in 2012. He has served as chairman of the IEEE Communications Society Technical Committee of Communication System Integration and Modeling. He served as chair of GI2C, the steering committee of the 2 flagship conference of CONSOC, and continues serving in the education board. He also served as a distinction lecturer. Michael has also served as associate area editors for several publications of IEEE and ECM, and as technical program committee chair in another roles for a number of conferences. In 2016, he was an instructor at the second IEEE Consult Summer School in Trento. In July 2017, he organized the third Consult Summer School, which was held in Albuquerque. He is an active member of ECE Heads Association, having served in the award committee and the program committee for ECE DHA National Conference of 2019-2022. He is currently serving as the vice president of the ECE DHA and the student travel grant for the IEEE GlobalCon 2022. So we welcome Professor Mike Devetsikiotis.
I paid him extra to read the whole thing. Yes. I should read the whole thing too. So just making sure the camera is there, I got it.
Yeah.
So
The camera is there, the microphone
yes,
is here.
perfect.
No.
Thanks for...
We are on the internet.
on the internet. Amazing. You stop doing that now, you can make me laugh. Right, I'm going to find my place here. So many screens. I'm going to pick one of these screens and point. Yes. Depends on the audience and the setting. I give a little overview of the, perhaps the camera is overview of our department. Yes, so here you have a quick, this is our building. Nelson, you haven't been there. I think you came to Albuquerque, but you didn't visit our, I don't remember if you visited our building. I don't think.
No,
Oh, yeah, you did, because we had the summer school.
The summer school.
Yes.
Let me see the pointer. Go ahead.
Oh, it's all right. Do you have the pointer?
Don't worry. No, please.
I'm trying to position myself strategically here between the screens and the cameras so we can look good for your audience. So anyway, this is our ECE building and a few snapshots of the campus. We have we have about 30 faculty. I'll show you some more slides. And in the US, there's R1 and R2 based on the intensity of research. So the highest classification is the R1. So UNM is one of those universities that is the highest classification for activity in terms of the numbers of PhDs and number of faculty per student and so forth. Yeah, we're very active in research. One way of measuring research is by the dollar amount. Switch to this side here. About 35 faculty, about 500-600 students, and I'm just showing here some snapshot. I don't know if it's very interesting in this case. What do you need? Oh, this is the pointer. I got it. No, it's all right. It's the pointer. Thank you.
That's it for you.
Thank you. Just don't point it in my eye.
Here.
Thank you.
Oh,
what we got?
You're very hot.
Magic. Laser gun. Anyway, I don't think you have, this is not super relevant here. Just give you a perspective of the size of the department, about 35 faculty, and the number of students. And for us in the US, because they have great appreciation, and the rankings are affected a lot by graduate numbers. Yes, so the fact that we have a couple of hundred graduate students, over 100 PhD students is quite relevant. It's a full ECE program with electrical and computer engineering. Pretty much all the areas are there, digital systems, electromagnetics, electronics, optics, power now, signals, controls. Computer engineering also very broad, from hardware to software, security, learning, telecommunications, networking. Also interesting in terms of our discussions for collaborations are the fact that we collaborate with College of Management, different variations. We have a master's on technology management, and also it's becoming more common in the US to have what they call accelerated program, which means that you get a master's and a bachelor's in theoretically in 5 years. So keep telling me. Right. Oh, I think this is going to also advance the pages. Yeah, this is really now. This is what I mean. Thank you. Really. Now we're better. So I'll be facing the camera. Yeah, this is becoming quite. We had it at NC State, and we have it also at UNM. It's quite popular with our students. What happens here is they receive, if you want double credit, they can use undergraduate classes for the masters, and they can use the master's classes for the undergrad. So by doing that, they accelerate. They make a 5-year program for both. So, see. I think we discussed this already. This is interesting here, I think, in terms of also about the faculty and the collaborations, is the fact that we have also optical science and engineering, which is collaboration with physics. And there is also the concentration of space systems, which is collaboration with mechanical engineering. and concentration on Internet of Things, which is also new. And now we are also in the process of the approval for quantum science concentration and cybersecurity concentration. I will say a few more things about that soon. I was just saying very. This is a very physical electrical engineering department with a lot of physical labs. In especially, it's a very strong department in applied electromagnetics, high energy, what they used to call Star Wars, right? To be able to destroy satellites. It's real. It's real. So there's a lot of funding from Department of Energy, Department of Defense on high energy, also pulse microwaves. We have a few faculty who specialize in that area. It's a very, very important area for the energy and the defense people. A lot of microelectronics and nanophotonics, optoelectronics, materials, very, very strong department in that respect. And then in the computer side, there is networking, Internet of Things, which is my own area, but also there's architecture and VLSI. There is also hardware security. In other words, very lab-intensive breaking of the circuit, not just the software, but how would you break into or would you attack physical circuitry? It's quite prominent in our department, and a strong subgroup in computer vision, AI, machine learning, and so forth. And a very, very large group, very powerful, let's say, group in controls. An area that is of perhaps interest also in, especially in Brazil, is we have a crossover between robotics and space. The Air Force and NASA are supporting a large lab on accelerating the building of satellites by using robots and AI. So there's a very large investment in a very separate lab, where this professor, who has also this classic robots here, he has a large team that looks at accelerating the creation, let's say, or the building of satellites. Right now, my understanding is it takes about 2 years to build a real satellite. I mean, I'm talking about, I don't know actually, but the cube, but like one of these things, big ones, it takes about 2 years. It has to be done by humans, right? With the spacesuits and so in the US, there's a push to try to cut that by a factor of 10. That's the idea. So they want to go from 2 years even to 2 months. Right? But that cannot be done just by humans working faster. Yeah, it's going to be done by also using robots, but they won't be robots that build cars, for example, or that it has to be much more delicate, right? Very, very special touch, right? And also to make them semi-autonomous, let's say, to be able to make decisions about something very, how can I say, delicate, right? And advanced as a real satellite. So it's a very interesting program. That program also kind of crosses over. I was discussing with the faculty about advanced manufacturing. So another part of that is 3D printing of pieces of satellites. It's one thing, the little toy stuff that we all know, but now we have printers that can use, so they can print metallic, they can print, actually they do both. They can do the insulator part, and also they can imprint circuitry, or they can make part of the electrical portion, right? So the idea again is that between, let's say, smart robots and more advanced 3D printers, you could be able to accelerate certain pieces of building, and let's say something as complicated as a satellite. It's a great area that we're investing a lot as a department in terms of advanced manufacturing and space manufacturing. I'm emphasizing because it's also a good area for collaborating with other departments like mechanical, industrial, materials, and so forth. And this is just very high level stuff here. I'm going to skip ahead. In the US, it's very difficult to promote all three, education, research, and service to the community. And again, we're very proud, very happy to be doing the new masters in Internet of Things in space. And in cybersecurity, we collaborate with the national labs who have people who specialize, let's say, in real hands-on security. This is not just security, software security. It's security that includes also the hardware, or if you want the, we were just debating earlier today about computer science versus computer engineering, right? So this is more a computer engineering side of things than, if you want, more software, more abstract computer science. Is about, let's say, assembly language and low-level security, right? Which is becoming an issue with the Internet of Things, for example, hackers being able to attack physical devices, right? So if you have sensors out there, or these things, right, which are part of the Internet of Things, they require the security that goes beyond the classic software aspect, right? So it's about very hands-on hardware, software type of view of security. And in our case, we're happy to be collaborating with both folks from the US national labs, like Sandia National Lab, Los Alamos, and so forth, who really go into the technical portion of cybersecurity. I'll show you a little later the interest we have in smart grid, for example, the electrical grid that is now supposed to become very smart. That's a great example of an area where you have a lot of distributed devices that sense, that actuate, right? They sense here, you actuate there. The challenge there is if somebody can attack, right, either to deny service or to take over, you have a real strategic problem, right, that they can disable the electrical infrastructure. Again, those are more in the area of Internet of Things than, again, in classic, let's say, a computer that is there and somebody attacks in the classic sense. I'm going to skip so I can go more into the research part of this. So this is my lab, let's say, or my group. But right now we have a postdoc and several PhD students with a mix of interest in cyber physical systems, systems that involve humans and machines, humans, physical, cyber aspects. I have spent a lot of time over the last 10 years or so looking at smart grid systems, smart grid communications. That's an area that it's also very prominent in IEEE Communication Society and the Power Society. Now they have combined to create a conference that's called Smart GridCom over the last 8, 9 years. So it's a real area now, exactly, for focus on smart grid communications, or the interface or the overlap between power and communications. In a way, it also is very cyber physical in that sense, right? You have the physical aspect of the electrical part of it, and the cyber portion, which is the communication and control. We have had some good success in modeling electric vehicle charging, other related areas of smart cities and IoT, localization, indoor, outdoor. So I'll show you some examples of those. In the last few years also, I had a couple of students who did PhD level work in the area of blockchain for energy and for markets, for energy markets. And more currently now, I have a couple of students who are collaborating with the friends we have in Italy on network software. What are the acronyms? Yes, network functions virtualization, NFV and SDN, and looking to make the network intelligent inside in the context of softwareized, virtualized networks. Of course, now 5G and in the future 6G. And the most recent topic that we're getting into now is the additive manufacturing. Let's start getting into the specifics here. Turn here so I can see with you. My own interest, and we're talking today about operation research with the colleagues over at the mathematics and the modeling folks. My interests have always been in what the area you would call operation research or modeling or performance estimation, performance evaluation, simulation. With a background in electrical engineering, I started applying those kinds of things in telecommunication systems like optical detectors, optical networks. Later on, those became wireless networks, and more recently, other things we call now Internet of Things or cloud or edge computing. But what's underlying from my point of view is always my interest in modeling, right? Modeling, predicting the performance, for example, right? So you want to be able to say, if I change this, the performance, right? The delay in the communication will be 10% shorter, right? Or the probability of losing a packet, right, or information packet will be 10 times smaller. These are the kinds of problems that we have emphasized for a long time, going from optical, what used to be again optical networks, in the fashion of, let's say, in the 90s, 2000, and then they became wireless networks in the later 2000s, and now they're more distributed cloud and edge computing systems that include all of the above. And of course 5G, well, it used to be 4G, 5G, next 6G. I have continued to have I'm fascinated by electric vehicle charging and infrastructure. 10 years ago, with a PhD student who's now a professor in Scotland, we started looking at charging of electric vehicles and basically queuing problems and how would you schedule the charging, static scheduling of if you have so many plugs, let's call it, right? And if you have a battery behind the plugs too, because it helps too, or always with renewable energy to be able to store. So sizing up of the battery and the plugs, let's say, for charging. And we were doing this already literally more than 10 years ago. So I'm very happy that we've had some successful models in that area. And more recently, we got into this other area of, this is a nice picture that one of my students found from a magazine. Already there are trials in Europe of electrified highways, let's call them, where you can be charging inductively, right? That's some people call it wireless, but then it confuses people. It's not wireless like that, it's inductive, right? Computer science, I don't know if you're engineers, but the point is, the same way that you don't have to plug it in anymore, you just get it close enough to the charging system and then it charges. The same, obviously the same principle can apply to anything, right? To vehicles. You just need a much bigger infrastructure, of course, bigger in size, more distributed. And this is not science fiction, yes, I was saying. If you look it up, you'll see in Germany already there are such pilot pieces of highway that they've done, especially for commercial vehicles, right? For trucks. And it makes sense. It makes sense. Anything that happens in general. Also for intelligent vehicles like autonomous vehicles. In the US already there are trials of big commercial vehicles on the highway. Where we are in New Mexico, we are part of Texas, New Mexico, California, Arizona. California is Interstate 10. That there is this consortium or coalition that has actual huge trucks, right? Those ones with 40 wheels that are being tried for autonomous. Now they don't have them alone, right? There's drivers now and then, secondary vehicles and such. But you even see them in Albuquerque, right? When they get off the highway. But there's a lot of trial. Again, it makes sense if you think about it that commercial vehicles are high importance, high priority when it comes to these kinds of things, intelligent vehicles. There is a lot. I'm deviating from this specific, but I'm speaking in general also to students and faculty. This is an area that transportation of commercial transportation is a huge business, right? It's huge business, and if you can get, let's say, 10% saving in the energy, for example, you save, that is billions of dollars already. So it makes sense that that's what initially there is a lot of, despite what you see on TV about Tesla, and of course it's very real, right, and the accidents, but they're really emphasizing the commercial vehicles a lot. And there is electrification that is making them autonomous, and there is also interest in other novelties, let's say. For example, the notion of platooning, right? And again, this is if you allow, it's like we're talking about Formula One racing during the lunch. But the point is exactly the same phenomenon there. They do it because they want to pick up speed in the slipstream. What happens with big commercial trucks? Turns out that if you really get them within a meter or less, they save almost 20% of energy if they can be so close, just aerodynamically because of the way the way the slipstream works. However, now you cannot have a human person cannot keep driving for 2,000 kilometers, maintaining the distance, tailgating, as we say in the US. So that is when we get into really advanced control, automatic control, right? That senses and corrects. And typically there they would have drivers. This is not autonomous driving, not the same thing. There's a driver, but the driver is just watching that the whole thing doesn't go wrong, right? They are there. But when they go into that mode, they lock in, and they're done by their automatic system. Well, three of these things typically, they will be one behind the other, and saving 17 to 20% of their energy cost. Which again, that's why you see that. Well, it's big for all of us too. But if you're Amazon, right, or if you are one of the big commercial transporters, you are saving a lot of money. So anyway, that whole area of how can I say, intelligent vehicles, it's something IEEE, such as promote also IEEE societies. IEEE has had the vehicular communications and intelligent vehicle focus in society and conferences for many years, actually. And that is another area. Coming back to my interest here, the slice of that program that we look at is that what if you were, you had portions of the highway, or it can also be intersections. It doesn't have to be just highways. It doesn't have to be continuous. It can be also, if you want a point, right? When you stop at the traffic light, that's where you have at the traffic light, you have the charger, like, you know what I'm saying, the big, under the ground, we don't see it, or I don't know, it's hidden next to the traffic light. But you stop, and while you're there for half a minute or something, and in a big city, right, it makes sense. This wouldn't be in the middle of nowhere, right? This could be especially, in New York City, São Paulo, or something, right? Because how much time do you spend, like we were in Rio this week, how much time do you spend waiting? Then you could be charging. However, that brings up an issue of control or coordination, if you think about it this way, because you wouldn't be able necessarily to charge everybody, right? And think about it here, the point is, this is not the one vehicle which is like used to be one Tesla in town and everybody, only one person has it. Now this is in the future where you have, right, 10,000, right, or 1 million in the morning in Sao Paulo. You have 2 million cars at the same time that are trying to coordinate their optimization, let's say, for electrification or automating their routes and so forth. That's where the communication, I'm trying to get, in order to achieve that kind of coordination, you need intelligent control. You need communication, you need the vehicles to be coordinating with some kind of centralized or distributed intelligence, right? That tells them, now you're going to charge, right? You're going to charge, or you have more need for charging, and you get the point. Right, so here we are. For the last 5 years in New Mexico, we have been funded by NSF in a project that's called SMART. It's an acronym, and you can skip here. You see here the acronym SMART here is Sustainable, Modular, Adaptive, Resilient, and Transactive. It's focusing specifically on what is called the microgrids, but it's not necessarily just limited there. The idea, of course, is that you have a large number of renewable components to the supply of energy. For that reason, you need immediately much more intelligence, let's say. Renewables have this characteristic. We all want renewables, at least that's what we claim, but renewables are very variable, right? That's the thing. Now, I'm just looking at Antonio here because we're talking about modeling statistics. There's a great area there for statistical characterization and all the variations of that. Prediction, yeah, mostly that, because you need to size up your system. The point is that if you're going to do renewables, right, it's like the sun, right? Famously, if you have solar panels, very effective. In New Mexico, we have a lot of them. Half the houses, we have, even the electric company, they advertise every day the percentage. They have about 30 to 40% every day in New Mexico comes from the sun or what you call it, the wind. But famously for solar panels, the cloud means 70% drop. At least, I'm not talking about the darkest, I don't think they're talking about the darkest cloud. It's not just a simple cloud goes to in front of the sun, 70% loss of the output. So it's very, very, for us who like statistics, probability theory, statistics, prediction, modeling, it's a wonderful problem, right? And the weather and these phenomena are famously difficult, mathematically very harsh problems, right? They're not, none of the usual models apply like that. It's not, what do you call it, IID, it's not Gaussian, it's typically very, very heavily correlated, right? If you have some now, you have some next. It's not like it's you see what I'm saying? It's not white noise by any means. It's the opposite of that. So you get now into, if you're going to be, what am I getting at? The point is, the only way you can make renewables work, you need to have storage of energy. You cannot have renewables working without a large-scale storage. They have them now at houses also that you don't have to have it, but it's quite becoming more typical that you also get one of these. Tesla sells them, the Japanese also have their own. All the big companies you can imagine now they're into the market of selling home batteries. But if you go with the utility scale, you need somehow to be storing. Otherwise, what are you going to do with it, right? If you're going to drop up and down, 70% up and down all the time, how are you going to do anything with that? You have to be able to store, let alone the fact it's night and day, right? And what are you going to do at night? And yes, you can have solar. If you just have solar at your house and you wanted to be independent, you wouldn't have light at night, right? You would have nothing at night. The only way to have the electricity at night, you would have to have a big battery if you were an individual. Now, at the level of the utility has more statistical multiplexing, let's say, ability, right? They can combine, and it's famously, it's a whole area, by the way, again, of storing energy. And you may think just electrical, right? But it's another whole area. It doesn't have to be electrical. It doesn't have to be a battery. It can be anything from I'm talking to the mechanical engineer here, right? It can be literally like what you call it that you used to use for the toys, the mechanical toys. What we use that? What's the name in English? You store the energy
the coil?
Yes, like a coil. Yes, like the old clocks or the old whatever. Yeah. It's viable, right? In theory, you can on top of the building, you may have a big mechanical system that stores the energy that way. But there's all sorts of things being tried, including using energy that you, just because you have something high up, right? It has a lot of potential like this, right? That is released in a certain way. A hydro dam is famously already existing huge capacity around the world for storing electrical energy in the form of exactly again you release it. Yes, and when you release it, then you generate the electricity. But People are even suggesting or trying out things like ice, right? That's a different, what you call, again, I'm not a mechanical engineer, so I forget, but if you can store energy by freezing something, right? Then you melt it, and if you have a well-made system, you yield back. Of course, there's the issue of how much you're going to lose, right? There's all these issues. But coming back to this, storing energy is a huge aspect of renewable energy. You just can't have it just out there. So you have to be, and of course, that for us scientists, right? Us all, creates all these wonderful opportunities, right? Because now again, how are you going to store it? How big is the storage going to be? Now we start getting into statistical problems, right, or predictive problems. And what is the size of the battery that you need for such and such parameters, right? So many, let's say, wind turbines, right? If you have 10 turbines, you know how big should your battery be? Well, it can be as big, but of course, at least some of us are engineers, so it's not for free, right? So if it's very big, then it costs you more. So you have to optimize based on some probability or some kind of average or other statistical prediction of your benefit, right? So anyway, coming back to this, the good thing about all of these aspects of renewables, right? If you start getting, especially what they're calling microgrids, right, which are meant to be smaller areas that can be fueled by renewable, but one of the famous properties or desirable properties of microgrids is they can go into island, what they call in English, islanding mode, which is, it's not a real island, but it would behave like an old-fashioned real island that you wouldn't have the electricity anymore, and it can operate on its own for such a long time, I don't know, for 1 day, 1 night, 10 days or something, without having the utility supply. All right, so studying these systems, right, and taking into account the fact that you're going to have electric vehicles charging and storage and the behavior of consumers and the fact that this is very distributed, it becomes a very, very interesting electrical and computer engineering combined problem, right? The electrical engineers are very much about the electrical aspect, right? How much does the turbine or the sun generate, and how much, what does it mean to store it, right? And what does it mean, all that. And the computer engineer looks at communication, the control, all of those aspects, right? Also, energy famously has a lot of economic modeling attached to it, right? Because it's unlike other type of commodities, let's say, electricity as a commodity has been studied for a long time, right? For a couple of generations. In other words, this notion of buying and selling energy is something that's been done already by the utilities, even today before the smart grid. Right? It's a whole group of people who make a lot of money, or the utilities, by buying from here, right, selling from there. Where do you get the so-called spot prices? And it's famously a real economic market energy. It doesn't apply to some other areas. But what does it mean now in the new area of renewables, right? And if you can store it, which you were not able to do before, what does it mean? And very, very interesting problems arise here, right? So this is an area where we are involved in, specifically our lab, together with a couple of other collaborating groups from New Mexico. We focused a lot on the networking aspect, so propose a wireless architecture that would be amenable to the kind of control that you need for these, right? So we started from looking at multiple communication, and then came up with specific characteristics of wireless that would allow low delay and so forth, so you can sense. And then another subgroup, there's a group in New Mexico Tech that looks specifically at cyber attacks and security problems for those kinds of systems. Also privacy, I wanted to say, I don't know if the problem is mentioned there, but the point is, something that is yet another whole area for somebody, for a whole other group, is the privacy is not the same as security. I mean, it's part of security, but it's not the same as one aspect of security is denial of service, right? I come and I attack, so you are without power. But that's a very specific sub-problem. Privacy is very different. With smart grid and sensors and all of this now, the government, right, or the big brother or whatever, or the, I don't know, the enemy or some malicious or non-malicious entity, they can know a lot of things about you. Right? They can know if you're at home, for example, if they're monitoring your consumption, they can start seeing which times of the day you work, right, or which you're home or you're not home. Just a very simple example. Much more elaborate than that, right? So privacy gets into this whole other area, which is very modern. How can I say this notion of protecting people's privacy and the fact that it goes also like all the discussion about the phone, right, and our data and all this kind of debate that's happening. It's also there, right? It's also other modern notions like so-called sovereignty of data, right? In other words, owning your own data, right? And this is also very important once you start getting into municipalities or groups of people who really want to have ownership of their own data. In New Mexico, for example, part of this alliance and big interest for us is we have a lot of Native American communities. So they are, in that case, they are literally sovereign, right? Legally in the US, they are sovereign in the classic diplomatic sense, that they are owning of their own selves and their own land. So now if they're going to do modern smart grid with some data attached for sensing, they literally want to be owning their data. They don't want their data to be owned by the electric company. If it's, you see what I'm saying? The Navajo, Native Americans, they are literally, if they're going to agree to participate in some kind of something, the ownership and the privacy of the data is paramount, as they say in that case. So again, another whole area of now you're protecting, if you put it in a database, for example, right? The database needs to be secure, right? Or it needs to be, the cloud, of course, creates all sorts of concerns these days. Because all of this, whatever we do here is going to be on some kind of cloud or some kind of, so who owns that cloud? Who has access? Right? But to give you more the idea of the breadth of this, right? Other teams, not us, have been looking at the more classic double in kind of problems, which are like fault detection, protection, and hardening, right? So if you're familiar from electrical systems, right? Fault detection is when the tree, right? Or what you, in the US they have squirrels. What you actually, the birds, the green birds, right? They
Yeah.
or whatever else it is.
Yeah.
It unfortunately falls on the line. But then, sorry, it happens.
Yeah.
It can put a whole city out. It has happened just because an unfortunate squirrel went to the wrong place. So this whole area of detecting the fault and how quickly you interrupt is very, very crucial. Like in the US this last year, they had some of these big fires in California, in New Mexico with this big scale. I guess in Brazil you're familiar with large scale. But yeah, they're going to have a fire that's going on for 3 months, right? Yeah. Not like in Europe, from a European side, right? 1 week is long, but in the US, in North South America, so you may have a terrible disaster, right? Which happens because a lightning or a tree fell. Now, it makes a huge difference if that thing is detected. Right now, I think it's like several seconds that they interrupt. So for those seconds, the thing is there and it's giving sparks. Yeah. If you get it down to a second or something like this, now you reduce the chance of a fire by, I don't know, 10 times or 50 times. So there is a lot of interest in detecting electric faults in this case, very, very quickly, and then actuating, it's like classic control, if you want, in some ways, problems as to how quickly you can. So these things used to be completely electromechanical, right? Now they're becoming predictably software There's a debate whether you can make them now, essentially, instead of having an electromechanical control problem, you have now a software like an app, which is on. You see what I'm saying? It's an edge computing type of device that will quickly detect. You start getting into data science and so forth. You can probably show theoretically that can be very effective. But now you're opening different issues. Now you're telling the utility they will have this box, a computing. This is more interesting to you as computer folks, right? Now you're going to have this distributed edge, the classic computer engineering out there. Now they will take who can hack it, right? Who can take it over? The software upgrade, the upload, the download. Right? So very interesting area. And we're kind of talking to these like big companies like ABB, some of these big companies, they have big interest in collaborating with university in developing some of these. So yeah, a very large group, I think it makes a good example for this audience here, right? There is anything from the renewable energy side, a lot of mathematical modeling in that area for as I was saying before, predicting weather, which is one of these notoriously difficult statistical problems. Control system, batteries, all that. Then you have the microgrid and smart grid aspects of course, now there's also this big push to make DC systems, right? I know we grew up with this notion that AC is so much better, but in reality, DC is better. But again, in Germany, they have already these very, very high voltage DC systems that have huge advantages in operating. Modernization, protection, a lot of topics that we're covering. We have collaborators from the electrical side that do a lot of this, and then our lab works with them on the computing, let's say, mostly side. There is an actual physical lab also, close to the Albuquerque airport. In this case here, they also show you from my colleague, this is not this Opal RT, this is an emulator. It's another whole area of this kind of let's say, introduction to people. Not a simulator, right? It's not. You have a box, literally like a suitcase, heavy, but a suitcase. It costs like $300,000 or something. Don't lose it, yes. That you plug it in, and you can make it behave electrically like the city of Campinas. You can say, there are 48 transformers and 36 high voltage. You can give it all of that, and it is emulator. You see what I'm saying? It's real time. It's not simulated time. So now that thing you can plug into real hardware or software like MATLAB, Simulink, and those kinds of things. So very interesting studies one can do that start looking like a real system, right? This is the actual microgrid. I was telling Antonio these days about Albuquerque and New Mexico being the opposite of your part of the world. Here's all green. There is all you can see. It's all brown and yellow. Very beautiful. There's many of the movies you see on Netflix are because Netflix actually, by the way, Netflix is there. I think these are the Netflix studios. Actually, Netflix just gave about a couple of $1 billion to buy us. This is the main studios of Netflix now are in Albuquerque. But more than one movies I can mention here have been filmed in this amazing flat area, desert area behind. But there is an actual microgrid we have here that has battery, they have hydrogen, all the different kind of renewable type of generation, solar, hydrogen, wind, and some huge batteries. And we can actually do some real trials. This is the mechanical engineering building where they have some facilities in there. By the way, UNM, we also have nuclear engineering department and an active, like our alma mater of NC State, which was decommissioned 40 years ago or whatever. The UNM reactor is considered active. You may know better exactly how that is defined. They have a small but very potent nuclear engineering. What to show? Yeah, so a lot of focus in my group, in my area, on smart electric vehicle charging. If you're going to do model the service, right, you have queuing models here. They're very interesting. The kind of math that we use is from queuing. Also, we want to model at the same time the flow of energy and communication, as I was mentioning with the cars, for example. If you're going to be controlling how the cars charge, and there's communication that takes place, you're going to model both the energy and the communication flow, and how fast that is done. I'm going to go to some specific problem here. This is before. This is from another student for how you direct. If you have an automatic system in your vehicle, that you enter an area and where you can charge, so it will automatically direct you. Some of these things now are becoming more commonplace, but we've been researching these problems of smart guidance and where the vehicles charge and how they are directed and how they're optimized based on prices. This is what I was showing you before. I wanted to show you more detail of that. The inductive charging, even to the point of having a highway. So the point here is if you have 2 vehicles out of 1,000, right, it doesn't matter because they can go and charge anytime. But if you have 500 vehicles out of 1,000 that want to make use of this charging lane, who's going to go first, right? Who has the priority? Who has the need? There's all sorts of nice practical academic models here, like if you have a price for it, if you have priority, high priority, low priority, the emergency vehicles, the government vehicles, I don't know, you may have anything you imagine is in play here, right? So who controls that? Then there is some kind of semi-automatic system that tells you it's your time to go charge, for example. But you need communication as well. So you need a vehicle to internet or vehicle to grid communication system as well. Right? So that is becoming, that's how now you need both communication and charging system. Again, the same picture here, showing a picture of what is a Tesla Model 3 or a Y model. So what we did with an example, we had a paper a couple of years ago that we modeled at the same time. We assumed that you have a limited number of communication channels and a limited number of charging, let's say, channels or options, right? So we have a Markov type of models that you can simulate or you can save, that you can optimize at the same time. Who makes the use of the communication channel, right? And you see we have 3 dimensions, right? You have time, but you have communication capacity that is limited, and you have electrical capacity. That's one of my things I want to make. I want to have these unified models. It's still an ongoing project, modeling the flow of energy and communication at the same time. In our field, just to speak also to the students mostly, in our fields of engineering, right, and in optimization and these problems, the problems come up from the fact that you have limited capacity always. This is for many years also with Nelson in the older days, in the earlier days of building communication switches or designing networks, right? This was the main problem. The problem is that you don't have any infinite capacity. By today, all of us tend to think more like, you know, the internet is this, I don't know, infinite pipe, right? That you put, but in reality, even today, that's not the case, right? When they advertise even now, then they say you have 100 megabits. What does it mean, right? I teach 4 classes on that. So it's an average or some kind of other indicator how they define the 100 megabit per second. But if you take a long study or the whole day, or if you're watching a movie or something, it's much more elaborate discussion. What does it mean to have 100 megabits per second? If it means that you have always 100 megabits, it doesn't mean that, right? So if your application requires peak, it's like aspects of peak versus average and so forth. The same also applies to any kind of limited capacity system in the end. So you have communication. Part of the, again, if you want the more recent sentiment, right, is that, oh, 5G. In fact, I haven't seen 5G yet here, but in the city of Albuquerque, I'm measuring the speed thing will tell me 450 megabits per second on my phone, actually faster than the home internet, right? But again, what does it mean, right? How many people can use it at the same time, right? It's all these things that we need to take into account for the future. So coming back to this kind of picture, we are trying to predict what happens, let's say, 5 years from now. Again, if you have the highway, I used to say Los Angeles, but let's say Sao Paulo, which I've seen, Nelson has driven me more than once to the airport, with 1 million cars, right, stopped all around you. Now, if those cars are electric, not all of them, right, but even if 20% of them are electric, and they're trying to communicate, right, and they say signal, where do I charge, what do I do, right? Imagine, my point is, now think whether the network can take that at the same time, and if the charging network can take it at the same time. Those are the kind of problems that I'm talking about here. Not today, you have one car. Also looking at queuing and caching strategies, optimization for next generation networks, right? And the NDN here is the main data networking architecture that we're using. So again, performance studies. Speaking here also to the non-electrical engineers for our collaboration. Very interesting. Always the issue of traffic prediction and traffic classification is always relevant. It used to be a huge topic that we studied for a long time, but it hasn't gone away, right? There is still issue of if you have quality of service that you are expecting based on the content of that packet, you're going to send it left or right, or you're going to treat it in a certain way. Being able to predict the traffic remains a very interesting problem in our field. That's when you get into statistical studies and characterization. These days now, of course, with larger scale data science and machine learning, again, our field has been using those principles for decades, right? It's just now you have much more stronger computing. Let's say you can do, for example, edge computing, which may be much more powerful. Very interesting topics that bring up issues like distributed learning and federated learning and other types of learning that may be suboptimal, but they are necessary if you're going to have a large scale edge computing type setup, right? One of my students, PhD student who happened to be working at IBM, he got into blockchain. It's another topic I want to mention here. He was assisting, he was the right hand of the CTO of IBM for blockchain. It was lucky on my part and his, before he went on to Netflix actually. Also, I have 3 students at Netflix, 2 of my graduates. So he came across this whole blockchain area. You may have seen all this. Blockchain is not only for cryptocurrency, right? Even though that's what we see these days on TV. It's a great, in fact, it applies very well to energy. That's what we had a couple of papers. Because if you have a distributed system, in that sense, blockchain is perfect if you're going to have a highly distributed system of buying and selling energy, which again wasn't the case until recently. Only the big utilities would buy and sell energy. But now, if you have a house like mine that has, or will have, I'm looking at getting solar, you're constantly buying and selling, right? You're buying when at night or when you don't have, and you're selling when you have lots of sun, or if you're not at home during the day, you're selling or you're storing. So now that's a perfect example of a blockchain, right? Or that now you have a large-scale network of individual buyers and sellers who want to be private, they want to be secure, right? They want to be the characteristics of the distributed ledger, right? They want to have what you call it non-repudiation. If you that you have sold or you bought that much energy, nobody can deny, nobody. That's what the blockchain is, right? It's this n-square network that everybody keeps a copy of all the transactions that have taken place. So it's perfect for that kind of setting with energy, right? So we had this overview paper in 2016 that has now more than almost 5,000 citations. This is what happens, right? Sometimes you get lucky. I mean, I'm lucky. I have great Greek students too from my hometown who gets in this amazing area, and you get yourself 5,000 citations. Right. So I was just saying this is perfectly matching for transactive energy. Again, when we say transactive energy, right? Energy was exactly the opposite of transactive until recently. It was just flowing like the water, right? It was flowing one way. Energy. You could not stop it. You could not hold it. Well, only in dams you could store it. But other than what hydro dams, energy was famously non. You could not. It was not something you could say, "Oh, here is a piece here. I'm going to store it here for you, and you're going to have it and buy and sell." Right? It was this very high level. You use it or you lost it, right? Now that you can really sell it and buy it in parcels, in pieces, you get in this situation where it's very interesting to see how you can, especially the individual homeowners, let's say, or groups or microgrids, can secure their own role in this much more distributed type of setting. We also had a paper with one of my recent PhD students I was saying before about fault protection, which is software based. We put a blockchain on those things to secure the software upgrades on these electrical boxes. So we did an example of how you would use a scalable solution of so-called main chain versus side chains. The challenge with blockchains, yes, is that it's the sort of the n square, if you want to think of it, problem, right? Theoretically, if we are a bunch of folks like we have the cryptocurrency, everybody has the same copy of everybody's transactions all the time, right? That's part of the strength, but also the challenge of blockchain. It doesn't scale very well in terms of the speed. That's why it takes a while. It doesn't. Right now, you cannot do updating these things in seconds or milliseconds, right? You have to take minutes or something when somebody buys some cryptocurrency. Everybody needs to signal. Everybody needs to get the same state event, right? Everybody has the same picture of that's part of the strength of it, supposedly, right? Because there's no central authority. It goes back into the politics of it, or the people rebelling and don't want to have the central bank control their currency. But it's very slow. That's the point. In this case, one of the solutions that we're also showing here is you can have like a suboptimal scalable version where you have like a hierarchy, right? You have a main chain and smaller chains, and then you make the thing update faster. What else? I'm running out of time to tell you. We had lots of fun both at NC State and at UNM for localization projects. Localization is a very interesting topic. Of course, one can see both ways, right? It's also privacy again and Big Brother or something. But there's huge advantages, right, in localization in the sense that from the big warehouse, like Amazon style, that if you know the precision of, you can be precise with a 5 centimeter, if you have how many warehouse or Amazon, right? 100 million items, I don't know, in the same inventory. You want to be, it would be nice to semi-automate that the thing that you're looking for is that, grid XYZ up there, but with the precision of within centimeters, right? So localization is a very, very interesting problem, both for people and for devices, and indoor, outdoor. Of course, now on the electrical side, communication, there's a lot of technology like RFID, like different kind of frequencies that it's a big topic. So we have done things here like indoor projects at NC State in the library, indoor projects with our students, with humans, with volunteers. Um, the idea is to be able to do things like, for example, for human traffic in a building, let's say like this building or a much larger building, even more important, right? That you may be able to predict where people will be. This is not meant to be with names, right? Again, this is where it gets tricky. You anonymize, right? The point of this is not to, or unless you want it to, but the point of this is not to say that Nelson is what Nelson does, right? The point is, for example, I don't know, for the bathrooms, right? You want to be able to predict the capacity or who goes, when do they go, again, not who, I'll take it back. How many people I want to say, right? Or the classrooms, right? Or the hallways that you want to be able to make studies of people, traffic, right? How they go. For example, before we left NC State, there was we were starting a project with one of these children scientific museums, right? That they have all these activities in the building, or think of any kind of museum. So they were very interested in this kind of project, not to mark yourself as a what does Antonio want, which again is a different project, but then they wanted to see how they can optimize the flow of people. Where do people go, right? They go, you know, think of the famous museum, right, in Paris, in Louvre. Everybody wants, 90 people, 9 out of 10 people want to see Mona Lisa. That's all they want to see. They don't know anything else, right? So you want to be able to do something about it, perhaps direct them. You see what I'm saying? In the morning between 8 and 10, everybody goes on the, do you see what I'm getting at? So the very interesting indoor projects, either commercial or educational or safety. We did a safety project I showed you here before. We started modeling for a football stadium. And if you want to evacuate, for example, if you want to detect some very interesting projects here, how about if you could detect the motion, if you can automatically detect that there is an emergency or a terrorist attack or something like that, and then you make an automatic system of how people evacuate. Because you can imagine if you have 100,000 people, they will kill each other if they're running like crazy back and forth. So there is different applications of this kind of human localization projects. We have done studies where we had permission, right, with agreement of the students to track them inside the building for a month or 2 months, and then do studies like so-called heat maps, you know, where do people go mostly, or where do they go? It can be static, it can be dynamic. This is more like a static thing, right? It tells you that mostly people are here, like the red areas are where they're more frequent, and the other areas are less frequent. But you can do also more advanced things like the probability of going from here to here. You see what I'm saying, with the mobility of people. It helps a lot design better the flow in the building. This is in the, we had a project with the Institute of Libraries, and this is the very, very impressive NC State Library, voted number 9 in the world at some point. It's beautiful. It's not even, it doesn't even have books. It's all glass rooms for collaboration. Huge, amazing space. Megan was my student. Here we have equipped the building in a way that the screens change. I don't know if you can see very well. The idea here is that as you walk through the building recognizes, it's like Star Trek, if you're a Star Trek. But you walk and it says, "Hi, Michael, you know, welcome. I know why you want to be here." And it can reserve the room you're going for the meeting, or it can give you the better path which way you're going to go, or it can show you the picture, like the favorite, I don't know, color of the building. It's very nice. New buildings like that, they have very advanced capabilities, from heating to cooling to even giving slightly different, the color of the light. You know what I'm saying? Make it. Some people like it warmer, some people like it cooler, some people like it like this. Yeah, a lot of this. Another item I will mention here, we have a sponsor at UNM who do medical Internet of Things. Very interesting for hospitals, right? They're quite pioneering. They are studying indoor localization, mostly for equipment. You see interesting applications for all of you. We will make some patent and have a startup make a lot of money. you wouldn't think necessarily, well, actually here it applies also, right? You have that card, for example, right? You have a card, but imagine in a hospital, again, I'm not a medical, but I'm thinking, it's kind of roughly thinking, they have a medical card, like it has the EKG, the EEG, like $100,000 equipment on a card like this. It moves around, right? They have 3 of those in the building, right? And they use them here. Tracking that thing, apparently is hugely important for the hospital, because they lose them, or they misplace them, or they're not in the right place. So apparently there's a big business, a lot of efficiency and money to be saved or gained by tracking medical equipment. So now what technology you're going to use indoor? It's also both electrical and computer engineering, right? On the electrical side, there are these issues of the frequency, right? How it interacts with the building. These are some of the famous problems in wireless technology. The frequency, the type of technology you're using, is it .11 Wi-Fi, is it Bluetooth, is it also other technologies like infrared or even ultrasound. So in our lab, they come in and they test, right? We have these rooms and they put these different systems to test the accuracy, right? How they, and in the back end, there is also the computing side. There is like the server, and constantly calculates and keeps track, and so forth. So some very interesting projects here for medical IoT, testing devices, right? There's different kind of technologies or tags that you're going to stick on the, right? And then there's of course software for tracking and optimizing, and all sorts of very interesting things happening there. This is very real, right? Because this sponsoring company who are employing our students in the lab, they have real products that they literally work with hospitals. And some of these hospitals now are becoming quite smart. Like I was saying before about the library, right? You come into the building, they give you some kind of tag. It's important in the hospitals because these things are big, right? They are complicated. There's a huge operational research type of industrial engineering type of strategies there, right? Where do you direct people? Where do they? Also, human aspect, huge, because it's not just the economics, right? It's also the human aspect. You want people to feel that they're treated properly, right? They're not, don't wait forever over here, or they go to the right places. It specializes, all these good things. It's a great field that we want to keep promoting. I'll give you an example of great overlap of Internet of Things, physical technology, software technology, industrial engineering, operational research, scheduling. A great example of. And the last topic I will mention here is more recently we're looking at a lot at multi-agent type of intelligence inside networks for optimizing the. For optimizing the behavior of network, it's still 5G, 6G networks, and so forth. So it's a whole other area. I have a couple of PhDs right now who are looking to optimize networks. This is also an area that allows a lot of data science, right? There's a lot of activity in this area for learning systems, right? So for taking in, for autonomous or semi-autonomous behavior inside the network, that it takes in data all the time, and it keeps optimizing itself in terms of what you call now machine learning, but very, very interesting area that we're into right now. This is in collaboration with our Italian friends, Nelson, Fabrizio's group, and the folks from Europe that we're collaborating with. Last topic. I can talk forever, as you can tell. There is, in New Mexico, we are inspired by the big challenges of the open space. I think probably this applies to Brazil a lot as well. Only here you may have lots of green stuff in the way. There it's open space, very difficult space too for people, right? So there are many aspects of protecting people, of economy, right? If you have group or like a small town behind the big mountain, right? That cannot communicate, or they have a how if they're going to have some economic activity, how will they connect to the rest of the world? Issues of safety, right? If you have the police or the ambulance or somebody who goes, and they need to be tracked, right, for their own safety. So we're looking at technologies. Clearly, you can do satellite, well known, but it's not a cheap technology. So we're looking at combinations of drones and other ways of providing, let's say, access to big open spaces. And so there's a hierarchy here of people, bots, flying bots, the drones, and then you may even have platforms like the Zeppelin, whatever you want to call it, right? And then lower satellites. So we're starting this kind of hierarchical dynamic solution that you can deploy in big open spaces for, let's say, for safety or emergency situations. And this is something that we're looking at right now, also collaborating with our Italian friends. And some of it also applies to the new topic that we're entering now, which is a highly distributed manufacturing by using 3D printers. Again, perhaps this is applicable also to Brazil as well. The idea here is to be able to give the small communities, far remote communities, the ability to, let's say, manufacture a piece of satellite, something very high. This is the discussion from last night. This is not necessary. This is not large scale Toyota, 1 million volts, right? This is really the opposite. It's 10 pieces, because you need 10 pieces for this very expensive satellite, right? Or something else very elaborate, but it's the opposite of large scale. It's small scale, but very high value, that can be now with the new 3D metallic printers, of the size of this room here. You can print whole pieces of valuable equipment. And in theory, you could do this in a very remote place. You don't need to have huge infrastructure, old-fashioned city, big infrastructure. So it's very interesting as an economic development, as a way to enable rural type of activity. But and our collaborators here come from the material side, or from mechanical side, industrial side. But then our side looks to do the coordination of the control, right? The communication and control that you would need to coordinate such remote operations. So this is an area that we're actively developing right now, hoping to start in 23 and collaborate with his mechanical and materials folks. The very interesting topics, again, this last discussion about supply chain or provisioning of the materials, is even down to security and the blockchain aspect. How will you authenticate where the supply is coming from, and to be precise exactly that's like it's supposed to be. Again, this is more about precision and high value type of manufacturing, and not about making a big plant in China or whatever to make 1 billion screws, in 1/10 of a cent in whatever. This is the opposite. For that reason, however, it requires a lot of coordination, supply chain, provisioning, remote operation, some very interesting topics coming to this. So in a way, I see in this area, I see sort of the future of many of the previous area coming together, that you have both the Internet of Things and the communications and security aspects and other things that come together in one very interesting area. That's what I'm looking forward to discuss collaborations. And also very interdisciplinary area, right? It's not only electrical or communications, but also industrial, even human aspects here, like community, social aspects, right? How would you train the people, wherever they're going to be, if you're going to be there. The idea again here is you want to make the economic development out there. You don't want everybody to be come here or to ours. So that's my conclusion there is that there's all these very nice connected areas from smart systems, smart infrastructure, smart grid, localization, and so forth. And in the center, you have our interest in communications and control. And we're always looking for collaborations and interdisciplinary teams that can make this thing useful. So, thank you very much for your time. Probably took more time than I should have. I'm excited about this thing.
Thanks, Mike, for presenting this.
Thank you for
This
having me.
opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
In the area of energy and joint with the communication, several opportunities for future work that we have.
In collaboration also, for sure, I look forward for topics and people who are interested
We
in.
still do the ATM traffic.
That's a bit, yeah, the technology has changed, but a lot of
But the
technology.
problem stayed the same.
Yeah, some of the problems are still not solved like that.
Yeah, I mean, this issue that you mentioned of this autonomous car and how to be the source managed for the communication where it's really implemented.
Yes.
And there's several
Right, yes,
issues.
correct.
Okay, any questions, Professor Mike? It was very crystal clear, and thank you again
Thank you,
for
and of course,
coming to Unicamp. The last time we came was 2006.
Nelson, just to say something, please go back a few slides.
Of course.
One more, let me see.
Here?
No. Go for. And the adjective, that's one. The adjective,
There?
manufacturing.
Oh, and mine.
The adjective, manufacturing.
Oh, it was towards the end. Here.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, here, exactly here, you can see the idea is to convey that there is all these different aspects which are different, not necessarily electrical, right? There is material supplies, and but go ahead if you have the question.
No, just a minor remark. This is the way to go to Mars. Just gotta think about this.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's not, I know we didn't speak about this before, but we are discussing, some of the Italian groups that we work with, our friends, common friends who've been here, they're already publishing papers, like Claudio and these people from Trento, they're publishing papers already for robotics on Mars and remote.
We went together to the NC State to get our PhD degrees, and they had this project going to Mars, and only, I believe, 9 universities were working on that, and one of them was NC State at that time.
Yes, I remember very well.
Yeah.
But the interest for very remote, a very good segue, thank you. Additive manufacturing and also, let's say, a very remote type of robotics, let's call it. It's very interesting for space, right?
Yeah.
Because you start getting now into the point where something like Mars, specifically, is completely out of range for remote control. You cannot remote control anything anymore. Right?
That's real problems there.
Mars is really at the least 3 minutes the closest, and at the most is like much more than that. Speed of light. So you cannot do something in 10 minutes later, CO, and then 10 minutes later it comes back and go wrong. So it has to be autonomous or semi-autonomous or some kind of halfway, right? So like something that is in orbit around Mars and locally controls what's happening there without you being able to 10 minutes away to do real-time control, right? Perhaps you upload, right? So there is these things where you upload a program, right? A method or a program or literally a program, right? A routine, whatever we call them now, that will be executed. And then the local thing has the ability to perhaps autonomously adapt or and there will be also even 3D making, right? Something will be making, right? We're building stuff up there, quite literally. But a lot of it will be non-human, right? A lot of it will be. But exactly the delay is changing all of this completely because now you really need autonomous behavior or semi-autonomous behavior. And you're very right. A lot of this is.
And can you say something about nuclear engineering?
Yes, per se. It's more encyclopedic for me. Nuclear.
How is it in the US now? Because we're talking about energy, renewable, and all the difficulties.
You don't hear, I mean, both the old department we were and UNM now, they definitely have nuclear engineering, so they are studying, it's still studied, right? There's technology that's changing from
New reactors,
engineering point of view.
Yeah.
I think also for reasons of societal or political, we don't have as much discussion about it as we should. So I don't really know much about I know in Europe there is a huge discussion, of course, about debate now that they are going to have a cold winter. Everybody wishes, or not everybody, but many wish they would have, like the French, right, a lot of nuclear reactors, but the other half people don't regret because they fear that there will be earthquake. So there's a lot of debate about that.
There's different concepts. Okay.
Yeah, the economics, my understanding from what I hear there is it's not so much the engineering part, but there is this very large-scale industrial engineering economic aspect because a nuclear reactor, a nuclear plant has to have like this 30, 50-year kind of plan for it, right? Who's going to build it because it's going to cost $20 billion to build, and then it's more of an economics problem, right? Of building and who pays for it and paying off, right? And then, so all of that equation seems to be the more focus of a lot of the focus of the.
Next one. That's remark. Solar, wind, batteries. There's a huge discussion on the impact to the environment. What you will do with the batteries, the life cycle. And is there a discussion on that?
There is, but it's not part of my, it's only, see for me.
There are no other people there discussing this?
Not in my sphere, in terms of my actionable sphere, let's call it, of what we do. But my answer to that would be our role in that, our side of that is to make sure optimization, I think that's why it's important to have optimization, to have the best control, the best design, so we can minimize those kinds of issues as well. And the way I'm kind of thinking aloud here as you speak, even early studies where we're doing this like electric, how big a battery do you need for so many cars, the probability analysis, those kinds of things. We were just using a number for the cost. But in reality, perhaps we can make a better model to take into account also the cost of recovery or the cost of, you know what I'm saying, the carbon equivalent or the pollution equivalent or the equivalent of discarding it, or now that we do for nuclear starting next year. I think the Finns are the first ones who are going to activate this 2,000-meter deep tunnel, hole they have drilled to put they're the first ones who will have that. Right? But that's part of the cost, right? Or if you're going to have, as an example, the same with the lead acid batteries, or you're hitting obviously a great point, right? But I have mostly encyclopedic answer to that, including if you go to the better batteries like the Nikon, all of those now, the rare earth type of stuff, and it's like who has those things, the cobalt, right, and the geopolitics, the Chinese buy the African factor, the only African center for making cobalt, and whatever. It's very complicated, but my understanding is mostly, like I said, layperson, encyclopedic, and this. But my take on it is that's why we better also be optimizing, not just saying, oh yeah, as you say, it's a good point, right? Oh yes, I'm going to have solar, I'm going to put it in this battery. Yeah, but if you tell me that the battery now is the only one, right, nickel or cobalt, or now that changes quite. We have to be careful about that equation.
How do you charge the batteries? Where the energy comes from? Not only the equipment, but how is it generated?
Yeah, exactly. And in this case, of course, we're talking about renewable, that part, but then you discharge it, how many cycles it will be usable. And so you were right to bring up that there is this aspect, both the environmental and the cost of the thing itself. I don't know. There's more reasons to be precise about it.
No questions from the computer science side? No?
We have.
Are you using
We
Fortran,
have-
for example? Are you programming Fortran?
It's still around, but.
I know.
Okay, Mike.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, and you see now I got all excited with the talk.